with no further delay, Avia, thank you very much.
Thank you, Tal, and thank you all for being on the same stage with me. It's an honor. So, welcome to the hottest, sweatiest panel of the day, Daily Fantasy Sports and Competitive Gaming Esports panel. I want to talk first about Daily Fantasy Sports, also known as DFS. DFS, for those of you who don't know, is actually an accelerated variant of the traditional season-long fantasy sports, which is a game in which users build teams of athletes from particular leagues or competitions and play against each other. The DFS is actually a much more dynamic version of the season-long fantasy sports, which makes it much more accessible to a lot of users. And the DFS market is an explosive one. Guys, in America and Canada alone, 56 million people play fantasy sports. 1.5 million Americans paid over $1 billion for entry fees to tournaments in 2014. And the global markets is growing in huge steps as well. So, Barak, you have a mic? I want to talk to you about DFS market dominators and the B2B opportunity. How can a new or smaller DFS B2C operator compete against giants like DraftKings and FanDuel being so well funded? And what is the scope of the B2B opportunity?
Okay, first of all, I will start and say that both FanDuel and DraftKings and some of the other players in the North American markets are pretty much marketing the same kind of products. Most of them are based on a salary cap format, which means that you can select any player you want in the league, which is a nice product that geared into savvy fantasy players, but they have problems actually attracting newcomers into this field. And one of the things that we do in Fantasy Network is that we develop simplified fantasy games which geared into mobile, and that really help us to bring newcomers, people that really love sports but never played fantasy before. Secondly, as your question, whether the market is saturated, I think there is a lot of similarities between the DFS market and the online poker market because they both rely on liquidity. And one of the main features of our B2B offering is the shared liquidity feature, which means that if new casino or gaming companies working with us and license our product, so they enjoy the shared liquidity and they can offer substantial cash prizes from day one. And that's something that make our offering more interesting to other companies that see the success of FanDuel and DraftKings and want to get into this market. And I would finish and say that the third thing is the rest of the world. The US market is huge, it's one of the most interesting in the world, no doubt, but the internet is, at the end of the day, is a global thing, and a lot of gaming companies and users that saw what's going on in the US wanted to innovate and to do the same in their regions, and that's why now we are working very hard and have a lot of interest from European gaming companies and Asian gaming companies in licensing our solutions. So I believe it's pretty much the beginning. People saw what's going on in the DFS industry in the US, and that's just the start of this trend.
Thank you. I want to move on to the legal aspect, which I would name 50 Shades of Grey, because it's really unclear what's going on today in regards to fantasy. And in the US, the interesting thing is that the UEGIA, the federal law, exempts fantasy sports from other forms of gambling. But there are some states that challenge this permissive view and consider fantasy sports to be gambling. So, Frank, Garrett, Bob, what are your inputs on the legal status in the US and in Europe and in Canada?
I think Bob alluded to it earlier, but coming from the GLI aspect, we've noticed over the last year that we've had a marked increase in operators, not so much demanding, but wanting more, I suppose, security in the thought that what they're providing to their customers is going along the right lines. So what GLI have done in the middle of this year in July is provided a white paper on on fantasy sports. So how we've done that, we've used our mathematical analysts to develop algorithms that use both skilled and unskilled virtual players to provide comfort to the operators out there that wish to maybe move into this market. I think when Bob alluded earlier to UGIA, I think the Act of 2006, it doesn't state that it's illegal or not illegal, but certainly we've noticed that operators want that assurance that they're moving down the right track when it comes to this. We've specifically gone about by employing an extra lab based out of Johannesburg in South Africa to look at these aspects of gambling as it moves forward. I don't know if you want to add more to that, Bob, on the legal side.
I think just a quick comment before you speak, Bob. We're going to have Melissa Blau and Rahul Sood of Unicorn right here on Skype as planned. Just had a slight delay. So they'll be joining us, just so you know. Bob, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, as I indicated this morning, it's still very unstable. The environment, obviously, in the U.S. right now, we've got Nevada has said that daily fantasy sports is gambling, and therefore is not legal unless it's regulated by Nevada. And of course, sports bets are legal in Nevada, so Nevada can go ahead and regulate there. The New York Attorney General has said that the daily fantasy sports are not legal in New York and also violate Consumer Protection Act and a couple of other allegations too. That's in the court system. Both DraftKings and FanDuel have challenged that. There was a hearing held this last Wednesday in Supreme Court, which is the trial court in New York State, and in connection with the preliminary injunction that the state has requested, the judge took that under the arguments under advisement and said he's going to issue a decision sometime in the next couple of weeks. But you know, looking into the future here, it's a wildly popular. There's no question about it, and you've got a lot of really big players who have invested in it. The NFL's invested in it. David Kraft, the owner of the Patriots, has invested in it. A lot, and some of the networks have invested. So I think at the end of the day, we're going to wind up with it being a regulated industry. It's just a question of how we get from here to there. And within that context, the secondary question, which goes to the issue about the big players, is whether or not the regulators who actually regulate this, whether or not they take the position that DraftKings, current ownership of DraftKings, current ownership FanDuel, are bad actors. And if they take that position, then the ultimate owners of what will be fantasy sports, which I think eventually will morph into legalizing sports betting in the U.S., but it's not going to happen. Most certainly it won't happen, I don't think, and through the next legislative session, because we've got general elections next year, and congressmen don't pass gaming legislation in general election years. But ultimately, we will wind up with fantasy sports. It will be regulated. The only question is who's going to be operating it. I think that's the end game here, just a question of how long it's going to take. And meanwhile, there are legal problems in connection with it, and frankly, they brought it on themselves to a certain extent.
Thank you. Frank, can you give your inputs about the EU market?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I think I agree with the observations of Bob, and I would like to focus a bit on Europe as well, because the storm in the US hasn't come unnoticed in Europe, and it's now also on the radar of the regulators in Europe. I think DFS has a great potential in Europe as well. However, similar to the US, the legality, you have to review the legality really by country analysis. It has already have been said in a previous panel, there's no sector harmonization of gambling at the European level. So each member state has a certain discretion to regulate gaming as it sees fit. within the borders set by the European Court of Justice, of course. But there's a huge difference compared to the US, because in the Netherlands, well, not in the Netherlands, but in Europe, there's already an existing and a mature iGaming market. And especially in the UK, there's already a long-established sports betting market. So I think the multi-million-dollar question will be if the explosion of DFS in the US is also going to happen in the UK with the existing of the sports betting market. I think time will tell, but in any case, operators who would like to target Europe should really do his homework and focus on the individual member states. And I can pick out a few member states. The UK, for example, it's quite clear on the UK Gambling Commission, you need an operating license to offer DFS. Well, as many of you know, DraftKings already applied for a license and soon to launch. You already have Oolala and also Mondegoals already operating under a UK gambling license and has signed partnerships with football clubs such as FC Barcelona, which has a fan base of 86 million people on Facebook. So there's quite some opportunities there. Also, if you look at Spain, there's no specific regulation for DFS, but it's also captured by the existing betting licenses. So also in Spain, you need to obtain a betting license. And I think the same applies in Malta. There's not yet specific regulation, but it's also been captured by a Class 3 remote gaming license. But there are also member states who take a different approach, like Italy. In Italy, DFS is considered as a skill game. However, skill games are for a skill game, you still need to obtain an online gaming license. And I think one of the most interesting jurisdictions is Germany. Jörg already explained earlier today that it's fair to say that Germany is in a total legal chaos, but there are some opportunities for DFS because in 2013 there was a groundbreaking ruling by a German federal court who said that season-long fantasy sports is not gambling, but it's a game of entertainment. So again, a different approach in a member state. And then Denmark. Finally, Denmark, it's really an interesting jurisdiction because it's one of the first countries who is about to regulate specifically DFS, and they're going to release soft gaming licenses for this product vertical with less onerous requirements if you compare it to sports betting. So there's lots of happening in Europe on this front.
Opportunities everywhere. Thank you. Melissa, can you hear me? Melissa?
I can. Can you hear me?
Okay. I think it's just a visual, but no life there. So
I can hear you.
We'll move on. Okay. Now? Okay. Melissa?
Let's try this. I can hear you.
Melissa?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you too.
No?
Melissa?
I can hear you.
Hi. It's good to have you.
Sorry.
It's good to have you, and you're right on time because your question's up next. So, Melissa, I want to ask you about the European market, but not from the legal angle, but from the business opportunity angle. There are a lot of season-long fantasy sports players in Europe, and only 3 to 5% of them play DFS. How do you see the opportunity in the European market in light of these facts?
Yeah, so a lot of people were questioning whether daily fantasy or any fantasy sports survive when you have fully regulated sports wagering. And a lot of people use or poo-poo the opportunity in Europe, which is, I believe, is very short-sighted. So here in the U.S., daily
Wait a minute, because we can just...
It has been good and bad. They increased the percentage of people wagering. No, I would take that back. People playing, entering contests from using daily fantasy sports from about 3% to about 11, 12% within the past 3 months. I do believe that there is a lag. Can you hear me? Can you hear me still?
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Kind of.
Oh, shoot.
Okay.
There is a lag in Europe because the lack of advertising. Can you not hear me?
We can't see you, but we can hear you. So
okay, well that's better anyway. Who needs to see me? So there's a lag in terms of the penetration in Europe because of the lack of advertising right now. But the truth is that people are always saying, well, there's no proof that fantasy won't work or you have fully regulated sports betting, and I disagree because even though sports wagering in the United States is technically not legal, except in Nevada and some variant forms in 3 other states, not really though, it's actually quite easy to get a wager on here in the United States if you want to wager. So everyone, if you know, even yesterday I was watching college football, everybody has a wager on. And so to say that fantasy sports can't thrive where there is regulated sports wagering, I think is a misnomer and really underestimating how pervasive sports wagering is itself. So I do think that there's a tremendous opportunity. It's just that no one's been really pushing it through advertising in Europe.
Some say DFS is an interim solution until sports betting is legalized. What do you think about that?
I disagree. I think they will both be able to coexist. I think it's a different, and I think, by the way, fantasy sports is in its infancy in terms of creativity, much like the way sports wagering, in-play wagering was such a revolutionary thing for sports wagering. I think you'll see some really interesting variants of DFS that'll make it more entertaining and more in mass appeal in the next few years, so that I do think that both will coexist. And I think they're actually complementary.
Thank you. Barak, would you like to add something regarding?
I would just add that from conversations that we have with some gaming companies, they see it first of all as even in this infancy stage, they see it, this product really helping them in their acquisition efforts, because apparently DFS is very attractive for younger demographics where the skill element is extremely important. And when you speak with young people involved in gaming, so they're less about which team will win in a certain game. It's more about feeling like they're the manager on the pitch, and they are very opinionated about different players, and they can speak with you hours about this player is underrated and the other one is overrated, etc. So I agree with Melissa that I think both of these products can live together, and I think DFS can absolutely help gaming companies to attract younger demographics to their players pool.
Thank you. Oz, we haven't heard you yet. What do you think about the European market and the market as a whole?
Well, I think with the European market, first of all, as Frank's pointed out, particularly with the UK, where you've got such unfettered access to betting and gaming, it's going to be more of a challenge for sure. But I think it will exist. I think when you look at the change in the market and you see the millennials now that are more looking at different ways in which they want to engage and perhaps take control of how they look at, not even using the word betting necessarily, but how they engage in that market and want to have that control. I think that's where it will, and as Melissa said, I think that's where it will coexist. So I think there will initially be a struggle of DFS pushing its elbows into the market, but ultimately I think it will find its way and it will succeed in that market as well, for sure.
Let's hope so. Melissa, we're going to have to say goodbye to you because we have to connect to Rahul. So thank you very much.
Okay. Thanks. Sorry I couldn't be there. Blame LL.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, we're going to connect Rahul now, and then we're going to move on to esports and competitive gaming. So let me talk a little bit about esports before, until we connect Rahul. Online sports wagering on live virtual games using either live or virtual money is a big trend now. It's literally endless. You can always bet on something any time of the day, every day, no breaks. So it's kind of easy to understand why this market is growing in such huge steps and raising so much interest. So Uriel and then Rahul, first of all, we're going to say hi to Rahul. Welcome for joining us. Can you hear me?
Thank you. Thanks.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
We can hear you. We can see you. So,
Great.
Uriel, tell us about esports and maybe competitive gaming from your perspective.
Sure. First,
Sure.
thank you for having me.
Esports is essentially the best way to describe it is they're very large video gaming tournaments that take place in giant stadiums around the world. So imagine if you will, it would be like going to a basketball game, but instead of going to a basketball game, you're sitting in the stands and you're watching a very large, elaborate game show type environment where thousands of people or tens of thousands of people are watching these 5-on-5 teams from all over the world play games like League of Legends or CSGO or Dota against each other. The crazy thing about esports is these tournaments will go on for days. So the arenas are sold out. People will come back day after day, and instead of being there for 3 hours, they'll be there for multiple days. And then on top of that, online, there's millions of people watching and interacting with each other at the same time. So the total viewership numbers on some of the top tournaments, like the top CSGO tournament, for example, rivals the NBA Finals. So it's a pretty interesting space. That's what esports is, and I think it's important to distinguish that from e-gaming because it's nothing to do with e-gaming.
Okay, and I want to ask you, as the founder of Unicorn, why did you choose to start an esports venture, and how does Unicorn bring in the gamer's perspective into the esports niche?
Sure. So when I think of gamer, I think of the traditional video gamer, which is what I have been since I'm very, very young. I actually started the world's first PC gaming company. We used to build the highest end PCs in the world. You can see a couple of them behind me. They were the most premium personal computers built, and we built this brand and eventually sold it to Hewlett Packard or HP. After I had left HP, I was with them for about 3 years after selling my company to them. I sort of missed gaming. I joined Microsoft and I started Microsoft Ventures, and I ran ventures around the world, including we had an accelerator in Tel Aviv or Herzliya. I had been working with startups for years, but I'd always want to get back into gaming. And I had been watching what's happening in esports with great interest. My kids were always playing games, and as many of you probably do, you probably wonder what your kids are doing, on the computer all the time. So rather than pulling them away from it, I wanted to immerse myself in it. So I started to play games with them online, and I started to spend time in these esports, sort of arenas and look and see what was actually happening. And it just blew my mind. And so last November, I quit Microsoft and started Unicorn. And for the purpose of I felt that there's an intersection between gambling and esports and video games that we could fit in, and that's what Unicorn essentially is. So So we started Unicorn last November, and within 8 days, we raised $3 million. And we brought on investors like Sherry Redstone and Liz Murdoch, and Tabcorp, which many of you probably know. Tabcorp is one of the largest wagering companies in the world. And then after that, we raised another $7 million with Binary Capital. We brought on Mark Cuban, who's a well-known billionaire who owns the Dallas Mavericks, and then we also brought on Ashton Kutcher as well. And we've since been building the most comprehensive esports book in the world. We have every major esport. We do exotic in-game betting, and we're licensed to operate real money betting in the UK and Australia.
Thank you. I want to ask the lawyers in the group, Frank and Bob, Garrett, what do you think about the legal aspect of esports? Do you think it's going to disrupt the legal scene in some way? Bob?
As I was listening to the explanation, I was thinking we've come a long way from pinball machines. I think this is a perfect example of what I was saying earlier today in terms of the internet and the kind of creativity that the internet generates, and that in turn creates a significant challenge for governments and regulatory authorities to define under what circumstances a particular undertaking should be regulated and that the people are engaged in, that they're playing, and exactly how it should be regulated. And I think this is a perfect example of the type of challenges and issues that are being faced. And it's interesting. An organization has been created that was initiated by it's the brainchild of the Oregon Lottery, and it's called CSGI, and it's for the committee for. I wanted to make certain I had the exact title correct. I'm actually on a committee with it, and I've been approving regulations in connection with it. The Committee for Securing Gaming Integrity, and what it is doing is it's seeking industry. In fact, GLI has submitted some proposals that are all designed to basically protect the consumer in terms of making certain that whatever is being put in the marketplace does have a high integrity level. And so I think that this is the type of industry, and so I'm not really answering the question. What I am saying is it's the type of idea that the politicians and the regulators are going to have to decide what they're going to regulate and under what circumstances they'll actually step in and say, okay, we are going to create regulations to ensure that integrity and that we don't have underage people involved in it. And it's a perfect example of the morphing of social games, which by and large are unregulated and they're free, although you can also pay money to get to a higher level. It's a good example of the morphing of social games and then fantasy sports and gaming into a whole new era. And it remains to be seen exactly how it's all going to sort itself out from a regulatory standpoint. That's my visceral reaction. That's why I start out with saying we've come a long way from pinball machines, which, by the way, were regulated in a lot of states.
Thank you. Do you think the industry is good at regulating itself until further legal developments occur, either in the fantasy sports market or other?
Yeah, and getting back to the previous question, esports is already regulated to a certain extent, and but in terms of betting on esports, in Europe we're quite pragmatic, and in most of the member states it just simply falls within the existing betting licenses, and companies such as William Hill and Betway already offering esports. In terms of self-regulation of the DFS industry, well, we've already touched upon that, and it's inevitable that the DFS industry will be subject to regulation, and I think it's in interest of the entire ecosystem. There are clear rules, and transparency is, I think, good for everyone. And if you look at Europe, DraftKings already applied for a remote gaming license in the UK and already introduced consumer protection measures and other measures to comply with the UK gambling laws, but obviously will also leverage those implementing measures also in other member states.
Thank you, Frank. Oh, yeah.
Sorry, I'd just like to, just on the back of that, to add, because it was one of the points that Melissa spoke of earlier. What we found in GLI is that, I mean, the games are made up of skill, chance, but there's a very, very high correlation between skill and chance when it comes to fantasy. Coming from Europe, people expect regulation. It's in their blood growing up. It's how the European markets tend to work, and so GLI have picked up on that. What we find is that it's more consumer driven than operator or test house driven. So, for example, the Fantasy Sports Trade Association, their recent survey showed that 48% of people in such an infancy of, I mean, this type of betting or gambling is in its infancy. So 48% of consumers want to have that certification behind those that they choose to use as operators. So I think that's very telling of where the market may go. And although we don't provide a legal opinion, we're certainly of the, I think we're going down the road where you will find fantasy sports to become a much more regulated market.
Okay, thank you. So, oh yeah, let's talk a little bit about competitive gaming, social gaming. I want to talk about the mobile social casinos threat. Do you think the industry that you've entered can disrupt the social casinos industry? And if yes, then through which leverage point?
First of all, thank you for having me. I'll tell first a bit about our venture. Papaya Gaming is a platform solution that enables studios and developers to integrate competitive gaming elements such as cash-based tournaments and challenges into mobile games. Players who score the highest in different matches, they gain cash prizes. As for social mobile casinos, they monetize extremely well their user base, and that helps them to outbid most mobile games in native affiliate networks, and that's really an issue. That's causing cost per install to skyrocket, and it makes it almost impossible for most mobile casual games to get discovered and grow in a competitive manner compared to mobile casinos. And marketing budgets are highly related to revenue streams and how you monetize. And it's usually measured by average revenue per daily active user and different retention metrics. And most mobile games gross less than 10 cents per user, daily active user, and that's really not enough to survive in this market. But integration with a platform like ours, like Papaya, might enable to bring it to a higher range of 25 cents and above, and that's really a game changer. We also work hand in hand with designers and gamification experts in order to boost our clients' retention. And also, these cash-based tournaments allow us to help games in terms of virality through incentivized marketing in social networks. So the bottom line is studios that will integrate competitive gaming elements into their gameplay will have a better fighting chance to compete and become successful and not only strive for survival. And well, connecting with Papaya Gaming is a guaranteed and safe way to win. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Oz, I want to return to you.
Thank you.
And as a true gambling insider,
thank you.
where do you think, besides the regulation and the legal aspects that we've already been through, where do you think these industries are going? The fantasy, the esports, the social gaming?
Sure. Okay, so in that regard, Gambling Insider's crystal ball, speaking to some of our guys in the office and industry individuals that we've spoken to as well, I think first and foremost is the separation of the two. Esports and fantasy sports, daily fantasy sports get pulled together quite regularly. I was recently at a conference where again the subject was there and it was both in the same bracket, and I think that causes confusion because I think they're both very different markets first of all. As we've heard from the esports experts here, who are far more qualified, obviously it's what they breathe solely day in, day out. It's clearly a market that's burgeoning. It's got a great global fan base, as we've heard. Stadiums are filled throughout. So the success there is only upwards, I believe. And when you look at the industry research figures that perhaps suggest that it will grow to be a phenomenal industry worth 23 billion by 2020, that's just incredible to think that that's what could happen, the potential of that. And again, it's this younger demographic that's come into play. For many, it's an alien concept to think that you're watching people that are playing a video game and that's creating this kind of interest globally, but that's the way it is. So for me, I think that's without question a market that is going to grow and grow. And I think with DFS, again, it's the challenge in Europe and how it will sit amongst the traditional betting and how that pans out. But one of the interesting things that we first reported on in 2014, we had a quote from Robert Bauman, who for MLB, Major League Baseball, had seen the opportunity with DFS for what for them was a stagnating sport in terms of the betting and the wagering and the interest really that was in baseball at that time. You fast forward now, obviously, Major League Baseball baseball is a big partner with DFS. So I think the future there lies with those partnerships, the consolidation and the mergers and acquisitions. And for that result, I believe it will be hugely successful.
Very interesting. So if any one of you would like to add something, you're welcome. And if not, then if the audience has some questions for the participants. Yes. Rahul, did you
By the way, this is Israel Bash. I got an email from him like 2 days ago. Please, can you please introduce me to Rahul Sood? And I also told Julian, actually, we met Rahul in EAG. So you see, that's part of the way why people need to go to these nice events. So Rahul, this is Israel, and you can answer.
Okay. I actually didn't hear the question. I apologize. Can somebody repeat it?
Yeah, Israel asked how you can drive traffic to your platform, to your website.
I see. Like as an affiliate, you mean? Yeah. So we're actually working on a few things. As you can imagine, things have been extremely busy for us over the last year, and we've been approached by pretty much every major betting operator in terms of how we can syndicate our product. And although we do have an affiliate program, it's very selective, and it's our initial goal was not to drive traffic to the existing platform by the way it sits. The thing about esports is it's not another line item, and this is what other betting operators are doing wrong, I believe, which is, they have a bunch of different sports already. They have football, they have rugby, they have tennis, they have all of that. And then they just throw esports on as another drop down. That's the problem. The problem is trying to watch a game of Dota or League is a very jarring experience for someone who doesn't understand the game. It's not fun. But by creating content and by bringing people on board and creating an immersive environment where the people who consume this stuff are actually able to bet, that's a totally different story. So that's what we do. We pull together great great data. We have, we present the odds in a way that people understand them, and then we market directly to this audience that very few people have access to, just because it's hard to get into the home of a hardcore gamer, for example. And at the same time, because we have this partnership with Tabcorp, we're starting to learn how do we onboard regular bettors, people who are punting on every other sport, onto esports. So I think you'll see us over the next, say, 3 months, probably by February, March, we'll have a complete commercial B2B offering that we can hook up for people like yourself.
Thank you so much, Rahul. We're out of time, so I'm going to thank you all. You've been great, and thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, all my esteemed members.